Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Gillette Pozos, and here with me is my wonderful co-host,
Omar Pozos. What's up, VGFN fam? How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, so, today we're going to talk about routines, and this is something
Diving straight into it.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how you were doing, just...
Well, you asked how VGFN fam was doing. You didn't ask how I was doing.
All right, how are you doing then?
I'm doing good. I'm really tired today.
You are? All right. We'll get through it.
Yeah. So we're going to really talk about routines today. So, this is something that I've wanted to do a podcast episode on for a while, but it's funny because my opinions on routines and how I probably would have taught on it has evolved and changed really a lot over the last year. I mean, definitely over the last 2 years, but it's one of those things that I get questions on a lot as far as I feel stuck. I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I just have no structure. I feel like I just need to get better habits. I need to have a healthier lifestyle. I just don't know where to start. This is where you start, is establishing morning and or evening routines. And so I kind of want to start this off with a little bit of a story. Earlier at the beginning of this year, or not this year, it's 2023 now, the beginning of 2022.
Welcome to 2023, man. We need that caffeine to kick in.
19 days ago, the beginning of this year. No, I'm talking the beginning of 2022. So a year ago, January of 2022, that's when I was very, very structured in my routines. I had really dove headfirst into Robin Sharma's from the 5 a.m. club, what they call victory hour. So this is the concept of starting your day with an hour that is split into 3 20-minute intervals. It's 20 minutes for reflection, 20 minutes for growth, like mental growth, learning, and 20 minutes for movement. And there's different variations of victory hours. I've heard a lot of different ways of doing it. But basically, it's some concept of really taking an hour that is really on reflection, personal growth, and just bettering yourself as a whole. And so I had really dove head first into it. I was using it for a while, and I really liked it. I was waking up at 5 a.m. to do my victory hour and starting my day with my cup of coffee, which I know I talked about that in my biggest mistakes of 2022. Definitely don't recommend making that part of your morning routine. Not good for the adrenals. But so anyway, I would really start my day with this place of reflection. I would start my day immediately with meditation to, really coming out of that sleepy place where you can just really dive first into that subconscious and do a little bit of just a little bit more visualization and really help just change limiting beliefs and do some of that kind of work. Then I would open up a educational book, whether it was business or self-development or just any form of learning, and I would read for 20 minutes. And then I would spend about 20 minutes either really working on setting up my day, setting up my goals, or I would actually do that as a form of movement, whether it was going for a walk, doing a little bit of yoga, something along those lines. And, that was working for me in that phase of life. And it's not to say that that is a bad routine by any means. I do recommend that, if you've you already have some great routines in place and you're I want to take things to the next level. I'm in a really good spot. I'm not fatigued. I already wake up early. I would recommend trying this out because it's a great way to incorporate some, self-reflection and some self-education and some really good, healthy things for you. However, if you've been following this for a while, you know that this was also about the time when my hormones were just shot, my adrenals were shot, I was exhausted, and yet I really consider myself to be such a disciplined person that I was I am going to stick to this routine come hell or high water.
And you did it for a little while, right?
Yeah, no, I followed that for a good probably 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, that's a good bit of time.
But once, I got my labs back and really saw that there's a reason why I'm having that first cup of coffee at 5 a.m. and having another cup of coffee by 8 a.m. It's because my body at that point in time couldn't handle waking up that early and diving right into things that are honestly a little bit mentally fatiguing as well. And so I, got to this place to where now I had to go down this journey of improving my hormone health. And I had to let go of that routine. I had to say, it's more important to me right now to get ample sleep, really allow my body to just get as much sleep as it needs. So I'm going to let go of that routine. I'm going to let myself sleep in. I let go of an alarm clock completely. I started sleeping in until 7 and then 8 and then even sometimes 9 a.m. which was crazy. I've been the type of person that's been waking up at 5:30 since I was like middle school. And my dad first taught me that like, oh, this is the best time to go to the gym. Nobody's there.
I like the hand movements for those that are watching on YouTube.
Ted. And so this was like, for me, it really challenged me. It was more challenging for me to not do these things that are really hard than to do them, because for me, doing the hard things was part of my identity. Not doing them made me question myself. It made me feel like I'm lazy. It made me feel like I have zero structure. And I really just did not feel my best there for a while. So I went through this period, probably through the whole summer, with zero routine, no morning routine, no evening routine, zero structure. And, I was also still doing a lot of things as far as like, really working on my health internally, working with my coach, that I was improving my internal health. And over the course of the summer, my energy started to pick up. And by the end of the summer, I was feeling like, okay, I feel like I have a little bit more energy and I'm really craving routine again. I really missed that version of myself that just like felt so disciplined and felt like so good, waking up early before everybody else and like accomplishing things before, most of the world had even woken up for the day. And so I decided, all right, I'm going back to my routines. And I didn't dive right back into victory hour. I wasn't going to be that crazy. But I was like, all right, I'm adding back in some meditation and some journaling every morning. And I did it probably for a couple of days. And then I just would fall off. And then I'd say, okay, let me maybe just try meditation and no journaling. Follow it for a couple of days. Then I'd fall off. Like, all right, maybe it's the meditation. Let me try journaling. Follow it for a couple of days. Then I'd fall off. I tried other things. I tried reading in the morning. I tried doing yoga in the morning. I tried doing these different things that in my head felt like this is what I needed, was this kind of structure. But yet I kept doing this thing that ultimately I learned is called quiet quitting. So if anybody is familiar with Leslie Crevar, this is Leslie. We've had her on the podcast before. She's incredible. Omar and I both work with her as our mindset and life coaches individually, and she's incredible. And she, at this time, I was explaining this to her of like, I just feel super stuck and I feel like I'm not, getting through on just maintaining routines the way I know that I need routines. And she was the one that said, it's one of those things where if you're adding these things in, but then you just stop doing it without any kind of intentionality, then what you're doing is you're just quietly quitting on yourself with no rhyme or reason, with no intentionality there. It's not a choice for you to stop doing those things. And that's why you feel bad about it. That's why you're ending up with these bad feelings when you're trying to do things to actually help yourself feel good. And it's just making it worse. And so quiet quitting is really just this concept of stopping doing things, like I was saying, without any kind of intentionality, typically because it feels too hard, because you've lost motivation, because you don't have enough time. It's like when the excuses start coming up. And that's what most people do. And what I realized once I kind of learned this term, I was like, oh, this is something I've done throughout my life with a lot of different things, where like I start things, especially, maybe it's the New Year rush where I'm like super excited to go after my goals and I implement all these new habits. And then slowly over time, I'm just like, man, I just don't do those things anymore. There was never any choice to stop doing those things. It just completely fell off. And there's that little bit of like guilt and shame inside of me for that. And so that's where I learned that it's okay not to have a really structured morning routine, or it's okay not to do things that maybe you've done in different phases of your life. It's okay to change your routines. It's okay to let them ebb and flow with your lifestyle. But it's not okay to just stop doing them because you're quietly quitting on yourself. It has to be something where you choose not to do that thing anymore with intention. And that's the difference.
That's such a great point. Do you think that's when you do quit or quietly quit on yourself, that's when those feelings of like, like you said, like feeling guilty and stuff like that, that's when those feelings is that when those start to come up?
Yeah.
Because I've never heard of this. This is the first time I'm reading it. That just goes to show how much I prepare for some of these episodes. But my situation is different than yours. And honestly, part of the reason why I've even started some routines in general when it comes to this stuff is because of you. And I'm like, I wonder what would happen if I try some of this stuff, because I've never been one to have a routine period. I've always been like, when I used to work a 9 to 5, it was getting up, going to the gym, coming back, shower, if I already had a packed breakfast, like hit the door. Like there was no intention about it. It was just kind of going with the flow. But now that I've kind of, obviously dated you, married you and stuff like that, my situation, because I see you every single day, I'm like, oh, let me try this and see what would happen to me. And as maybe in the last, what would you say, year, maybe year and a half, I've started implementing some steps to help me stay more structured, and if anything, just help me stay more intentional about how I go about doing my day. And so far, I've really enjoyed it. So
yeah. Well, so one thing that's like I personally believe is important to point out there too. You were doing right there as you were talking. You were doing something that is very, very common, and I spot in people often, where we say like, "Oh, I don't have routines," or "I'm not good at routines," or "I've never had routines." You did have routines. You laid it out for us right there, and that's where a lot of our routines are just accidental. They're just the way we wake up and go about the world. But if you ask yourself, most people have some form of routine in place.
Okay.
That's not an issue. It's more of like, is this the routine we want to have? And what can we add or remove to make it the kind of routine that we want to have that's going to help us feel the way we want to feel and then go into our day or close out our day how we want to feel. And really have that be intentional.
That makes sense. It's more of like, okay, whether it's by default or whether it's by intention, what we do on a morning basis or an afternoon basis, are those actions taking us to where we want to go? And if not, what can we change? What can we add? What can we take away to help us get there? As opposed to doing these things over and over and then being like, why can't I do these things, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, when I'm saying like over the summer, I had no routines, I genuinely mean that I some days would wake up and maybe one day I wake up at 7:30 and maybe at that point, maybe you've already taken Zoe out for a walk. So I'm like, okay, I don't need to take her out and I'm feeling pretty tired. So I don't really feel like going outside. It's like, oh, you know what? I'll just go ahead and make breakfast. And then I would make breakfast and then maybe I would, start scrolling on social media because that seemed interesting. And then, maybe I might just go ahead and go right into work. And then at that point, I'd go into work just with this kind of like scattered brain because I hadn't really done anything to set myself up for the day.
Yeah.
Other days, maybe I would wake up at 8 and maybe then I would say, you know what, I feel a little bit more well rested and I feel like going for a walk, and I might go out for a walk and then maybe I'd come in and be like, you know what, now I'm going to shower. And then, at that point, maybe I'm like, oh shoot, now I need to hop on this meeting so I don't have time to eat breakfast. And then I'm like rushing to make a snack instead of a nutritious breakfast. Like when I say I didn't have a routine, I meant that if you watched my life like a movie, every single morning was looking different between like June and August.
That'd be one hell of a movie to watch.
Oh, it was
they'd be like, wow, her husband is so hot. You keep saying the word walk, by the way, and I whispered it because our dog Zoe's here. Every time you say it, her head turns and she's like, Mom, are we going somewhere? I know that word.
So that's where, I went through this process of deciding, okay, like I need to establish better routines. And so I want to talk a little bit today of like what that's looked like for me since then and how I've brought back routines, because I think this is actually going to be extremely helpful for people who are probably stuck in that place of like, maybe they're in the camp that you used to be in of like, you have a routine, but it's not really an intentional routine of like, it's just how you start your day to make sure you get to work on time.
Just what I do by default because
exactly. It's not by design, it's by default.
Right.
Or there might be other people who maybe they more fall into the camp that I was in. Like maybe they work from home, they have a loose schedule, they might just like not have an alarm in the morning. So some days they sleep in later, some days they wake up earlier and they just don't have any, once they wake up, they go off of what they feel like doing in the moment.
Yeah.
There's no set plan in place.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be super helpful because I know recently we've had a big influx of night shift nurses that have come to us and they're like, I just wake up at 4. I'm lucky if I get some food in before I go to work. Otherwise, I just shower and go straight to work. And it's now 5, 6 o'clock, and I haven't eaten a thing in my day. So I think this is going to be helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah. So really, when it comes to routines, I mean, this should be no surprise. But if you want something, if you want to feel a certain way, you want to achieve a goal, whatever it is that you want, you have to have a plan for it. Because if there's no plan, you're planning to fail. It's a cheesy statement because it's
if you don't plan, you plan to fail. Yeah.
But it's the reality of like, if there's no plan and we just let life happen, we're always just going to end up just flowing and feel like we're just like lost in the current. We're not just like riding the waves. We're just lost in, treading water to stay afloat. So when it comes to routines, a big realization that I had over the last few months was that I used to be somebody who was extremely structured in the mornings. I always have had a morning routine. And one thing that I didn't even have this aha moment until recently was that even last year, when I was gung-ho about following the Victory Hour morning routine, I, was also struggling with my hormone health. My energy was tanking, but because I was so disciplined, I would stick with it. But because it wasn't really right for me in that phase of life, by the end of the day, I was so exhausted, like mentally and physically, that I had zero evening routine. And my evenings literally just looked different every day because it was like some days I was just so mentally burnt out that I would just find myself mindlessly scrolling social media, even though I'm like actively thinking I don't want to be on social media right now. But it seemed like the only thing I could do because I'm so tired. Or maybe I'd put on a show because I'm just so exhausted and I just don't even want to think about what else I could be doing. And then now I'm staying up too late and, you end up in that cycle. So what I realized a few months ago was that I'm making a big mistake here by focusing so much on my morning routine because I don't feel my best right now in this phase of my life in the mornings. I still, to this day, like I was just telling him, it's the morning time we went to record and I was like, I'm really tired today. This might be interesting. And
I was like, do we need to record a podcast today?
I was like, I'm really physically tired. And that's just the reality of it, of like, as much as my hormone health has improved, I do know that I don't believe my cortisol is quite where it needs to be yet in the mornings. I just did another Dutch test, so we'll confirm that soon. But I still feel like I'm just off in the mornings. I feel low energy. I feel groggy. And so when I'm trying to have this structure, some days it just doesn't work for me. Some days I do need to still sleep in a little bit later. Some days I just have to listen to my body and see what my body needs. So for that reason, I decided I'm not going to focus on a morning routine right now. I'm going to focus on an evening routine because that's when point. I have the most energy in this current phase of my life. So that's where the opportunity is. And I wanted to capture that opportunity. So that's where I really, especially with setting my New Year's goals, I really sat down and said, okay, if these are my goals for 2023, what kind of routines would help me get towards those goals? And so I identified that having a very structured end of workday routine plus having a structured evening routine would be really beneficial for me right now. And it's realistic. And that's the key. It's realistic for me to follow those things right now because I have energy in the afternoon and the evening.
Man, that's such a great point. And if anything, like you said, you're setting yourself up for success. There's no guilt. There's no remorse if you're like, wow, I'm still waking up later in the day and my morning is a little bit more free so I can do whatever I want with how I feel, depending on how I feel. But you structuring your afternoon the day before and be like, all right, well, I know if anything tomorrow, if I at least get this done, it's still going to push the needle forward. It's still going to help me get 1% better. That's very smart. You're a smart gal, Ness.
Wow, thanks. Only took 104 episodes?
104 years? 104 episodes, yes.
But so, when it comes to establishing routines, I'm a big believer in your routine should be written down. Maybe not everybody will agree with this, but I believe just like your goals, they should be written out so that you have that structure in place. Because otherwise, when you're trying to get into a routine, it might be honestly hard for you sometimes to even be like, oh, what am I going to do now? What's next? And when we're establishing a routine, we have to have a plan of when and how you're going to do something. But it's also important to know why you're doing that thing. So again, we don't want to just insert things into our routine that are just maybe feeling like, oh, this is what I should do, or this is what I've seen other people do, or this sounds like a good idea. Everything should be very intentional and have a reason why it's fitting into your routine. You can always add more things. Start with the things that feel really, really good and have a really strong reason why.
So give us the meat and potatoes. What do you do?
So for my end of day shutdown routines,
and again, this is what works for you. It doesn't across the board, right?
Just to maybe give people some ideas of things that you could be doing. But the point is that you're going to have different routines at different seasons of life, depending on what your goals are, depending on what your current life is looking like, the demands of your life. It's always going to ebb and flow and change. It might change with the season. It might change by year. It might change by week. And that's okay as long as it's intentional. When you remove something from your routine, it should be an intentional decision. Again, I am just go and, listen to Leslie's podcast. It's The Mindset Maniac on Spotify. She just did a podcast episode about this concept as well of establishing routines and quiet quitting. And she explains it really, really well. but you should not just quit on yourself. Everything should be an intentional decision. So for me, my current end of day shutdown routine, meaning this is how I close out my workday, which is really, really important because this separates my work self from my personal life self. Extremely important for people who work from home because it's really easy to let work just bleed into the rest of your life. And if we don't have that end of day routine, it's hard for our brains to even know that it's time to shut off. And that's how we can end up in these places to where we're, like we've talked about on previous episodes of, we end up fatigued mentally and physically and can end up resulting in adrenal fatigue because we're spending so much energy just thinking about work 24/7.
And if you think about it, you're always thinking about work. You're not present with family because it's time, if you're already at dinner or stuff. So not only are you not present at work, you're not present with your loved ones, with family, and you're just nowhere to be found at all, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, exactly. So when I'm ready to end my workday, whether it's 5 or 5:30 or 6, I always follow a very strict cadence of things. So I start by, we use Slack as our internal messaging platform with our team members. I always start by clearing out my Slack messages. Whether there's anything that I need to answer, I get answered. If I can't answer it, I push it to tomorrow so I can actually mark it as read, but schedule a reminder for the next day. So, recommend Slack if you have an opportunity to use it for your business. But once I have my Slack messages cleared, I go to Asana, which is our task management platform, and I review my tasks for the day. I check off all the ones that were completed, reassign anything that wasn't completed, just make sure that that day's tasks are accounted for. Then I go through my Google Calendar and my Asana tasks for tomorrow. So I want to make that time to look ahead, see what I have on my plate for tomorrow, and this gives me a chance to make sure that I'm have a plan for everything for the next day. We don't want to go to bed worrying about, oh my gosh, what is tomorrow going to be? What's tomorrow? What's going to happen tomorrow? That's going to stress you out. You're not going to sleep well. So we want to make sure that we're always looking ahead. Then I review my 1-year goals because I think it's really, really important to just always keep your goals top of mind. Then I review my weekly big 3, which we could do a whole nother podcast episode on this concept of really having your big 3 tasks for the week that you accomplish. That is your measure of success for the week. Then I create my big 3 for the next day. That's another thing that really goes along with that concept of each day you have 3 tasks that are your big 3 for the day that ladder up to your weekly big 3. And then I create my task list for tomorrow in my planner, so I have it written out. This way I know that everything's accounted for. I know what my plan is for tomorrow, and I can really close out my workday feeling like, okay, I have a plan for tomorrow. I can now stop thinking about work, and I can really remove that mental energy. Then I have my evening routine. So between my workday shutdown routine and my evening routine, obviously, then that's when there's a lot of freedom, a lot of just depends on, what we have on the schedule. Maybe it's running errands, maybe it's just hanging out, whatever that looks like.
Or taking Zoe over to I don't even want to say it because she knows
the PARK.
Yes. And she's like, oh yeah, that's my time.
Yeah, exactly. But so then I have my evening routine. And so this always initiates with me making my my magnesium supplement, which is a drink that I drink. But I also have other supplements that I take. So that's kind of my first step in my evening routine, and it initiates that for me. Then I brush my teeth. Then I get into bed and I grab my journal. And this is when I do some journaling. So notice how journaling was something that I used to try to insert into my morning routine, and I couldn't stay consistent with it. And I just always felt so stuck. I was like, what is wrong with me? Why can I not stay consistent with this thing? And that's when I realized it's just not working at this time of day in this current phase of my life. Now, doing it in the evenings, I've been incredibly consistent with it. And it's felt really, really great for me to close out my day with this practice. So there's a lot of different ways you can journal. Currently, right now, my process for journaling is I do a gratitude list, which is extremely beneficial to take that moment to really feel gratitude for things in your life, because no matter what's going on in your life, there are always things to be grateful for. And then I do a thought download, which is really something that I'm working on with Leslie, with my life coach, of just really getting all my thoughts down on paper, because we write much slower than we think. And so it's really, really important to just get those written out, really acknowledge them, really notice how each thought is making me feel. I'll even label it and say, this thought is making me feel this emotion. And then I can really reflect on those thoughts and decide which ones are really serving me right now, which ones are not helpful for me right now, and do some processes to work through that. And so then, that wraps up my journaling. And then I finish out my evening routine with reading. So again, that's another thing that I was trying to insert in my morning routine. It wasn't working for me. But I love to read. I love to read self-development books. I love to read business books. And so now this is that dedicated time for me to do that before I go to sleep. And for me personally, it actually helps me go into a little bit more of a restful sleep because I really enjoy reading, but after a certain point of time, at that time of night, I just start to get really sleepy. And so it does help me just kind of wind down from the day.
Yeah. And how long does that routine take for you usually?
It does depend. I have it written out with each. I've actually tracked how long it takes me to do each thing. And then I plan that out so that I know how long I need to kind of factor into my day. So from start to finish, I have factored I added it up to be 57 minutes. But that being said, that's when I say, okay, if I want to be asleep at X time, I can back it down and say, okay, if I need to give myself an hour from start to finish for that routine, what time do I need to start the routine? What time do I need to make that magnesium?
You kind of go back, count backwards kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, to be fair, it doesn't always take me an hour. Sometimes it's much faster. Sometimes it's, it rarely is longer. I would say that's the top end of that length, but I want to make sure I give myself enough time to do so. And so that's how I can plan that in. And so that's my evening routine, my end of day shutdown routine. Again, morning routines is something that I realize that this is just something that's not really working for me in this phase of life to have a ton of structure. But that being said, like we talked about there with Omar, you might have routines that are still in place of just how you go about your day. So I identified what are the commonalities from one day to the next that I always do. And so for my morning routine, I don't have the type of structure of saying I do this and then I do this and then I do that. I don't have an order to it. I just have a couple of things that are my non-negotiables that I always make sure I get done in the morning. So if today I'm feeling really tired, I don't feel like doing all the other things I might do other mornings, I make sure that I at least do a couple of things. And that's eating a very nutrient-dense breakfast. That's getting Zoe outside so I can get some sunlight. Really, really important to start your day with getting a little bit of sunlight on your face and your eyes. It helps set your circadian rhythm. Really good for you. I drink my mud water. So that's my coffee replacement.
Not actual mud.
Yeah, no, it's I really recommend, look it up. It's basically like a tea adaptogen type drink. And then I take my morning supplements and I brush my teeth, and those things always happen. Some other things that I might do is I might do dry brushing, because that's really, really great for just lymphatic drainage. Really, really good, especially if you are just working on your internal health. I might do a shower with a cold shower at the end. Helps also just reset my nervous system. I might listen to an educational podcast. I might put on some makeup or do my hair. Obviously did not do that today based on how I'm currently looking if you're watching the video. But those are some things I might insert, but I give myself that freedom of choice with those things.
Yeah. And man, because it sounds like it's a lot. How do you navigate, picking and choosing, I don't know, what you want to do on that day? Is it just kind of preference, or how you feel, how much energy you have, or what does that look like?
I really just turn inward and ask myself what would feel good right now. And it's not from a place of, what would feel good? Scrolling social media would feel good. It's not the instant gratification type of feeling good.
Yeah.
It's knowing yourself and knowing what is good for you and what feels like the right thing to do on that day.
Okay. Gotcha. Mine is a little bit different. I don't have as much structure as Vanessa. I still use the full focus planner, which is the setup that Vanessa was talking about, our weekly big threes, our daily big threes, and then also helping us look at our yearly and quarterly goals. So my morning routine, I like to be a morning person. That's just kind of what has worked for me lately. So in the mornings, I would get up, go straight to the gym, and then start my day. I've changed that recently because I like the quietness in the morning. I like the time for myself. So I'll wake up, 5:30, sometimes 6 o'clock, go. And I always like to start with a shower just because it helps me wake up, and it helps me just start my day. After that, I'll grab a book and then I'll start reading for 15, 20 minutes, or I'll start doing some journaling. Now that I'm working with Leslie, I'm going to start implementing some of that thought download in there as well. Start doing, and if anything, like I said, I just like the quietness, the stillness. Zoe's still sleeping. You're probably still sleeping. So I'm like, all right, this is like Omar time. So I love that. If I don't get to, journal, maybe I'll do some meditation. Lately, I've kind of started doing some praying. So that's been adding in there. And that just kind of helps me, if anything, like I said, just get my day focused and help me, stay in tune with myself and what I need for that day. After that, we'll eat breakfast, take Zoe out on a walk. I'll get to hang out with you for a little bit, and then I'll dive straight into work. What has helped me is, the day before, I'll have a evening routine. I don't think it's as structured as yours, but if anything, I will go through my calendar for the next day, look at what my next day is looking like, see what kind of calls I have, what kind of meetings, whatever. And then that way, when I go dive into work the next day, I already know what to expect. So like you said, there's no anxiety. There's no worry. I mean, there's still a little bit of anxiety here and there, but it's not because I don't know what to expect. It's just because of other circumstances, right? But at that point, I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do for the day. These are my top 3 things that I need to get done today. This is my priority. And then boom, we kind of go and execute there. But yeah, that has, it's a lot less detailed than kind of what you covered, but that's what has worked for me. In addition, of course, in the afternoons, like you were saying, I'll do my magnesium drink, I'll do my supplements, but then I go straight into bed because then I wake up early the next day and do my reading then, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you're usually passed out by the time I'm still journaling.
I know, and it's crazy because, you usually used to be the one that would go to bed earlier.
Oh, yeah. That was the thing, that was a big symptom of my hormonal imbalance, but I was by 8 p.m. just crashing. If we turn on a movie or something, I was out because I was so exhausted.
And that's what I think, speaking of movies, I think that's one of the biggest things that has allowed us to have the time to do some of these afternoon routines is we really don't watch much television Monday through Thursday. Saturday and Sunday, we'll kind of, distract ourselves and put on something fun just to watch it. But other than that, having that time to, like you said, do things with intention, do things with purpose has really, for lack of a better word, been very purposeful for us so that, we go about our days with a little bit much more structure. And I think one of the things we were talking about before we even started the podcast was it's not necessarily about adding things to your plate or doing more meditation or doing more of this, more of that. It's about really looking at what you're doing and asking yourself, is this going to take me to where I want to go? Because it's not about adding things to your plate. It's about removing the stuff that's there and isn't getting you to where you want to go, because that's probably part of the reason why you're feeling so overwhelmed and you don't have time to do any of this stuff to begin with, right?
Exactly. So let's wrap it up with what are the takeaways here for our listeners. So if you're thinking, okay, where do I even start? I want to have some routine in my life. I would start by asking yourself, when do you have the most energy or just motivation right now? Is it the evening? Is it the morning? Just pick one of those and start there. Start with adding structure and just one end of your day, one of the bookends. Then make a list of all the things that you could do. What are the things that kind of excite you? Your morning routine should feel good. It should feel like something that you're excited to do. Same thing with evening routine. It shouldn't feel like an obligation. So what are the things that you're oh, I could start doing that. That would make me feel good. That would really help just benefit me. That would help move me towards my goals. Just list out as many things as you can think of that just appeal to you at this point in your life. Then go through the list and just ask yourself, if I only implemented one thing from this list, which of these things would be the most beneficial for me right now, or would just be the most impactful for me towards hitting my current goals? And just start there. If you have no routines at all, start with one thing and then insert that into your day. Ask yourself, what are your current habits? You probably brush your teeth every morning. I hope so. Maybe that's something you could anchor your new habit to, of okay, when I brush my teeth, the next thing I'm always going to do is this new habit I have. Start there. If you want to, you can kind of take it next level and add a couple of things and do like I do of saying, okay, first I do this, then I do that, then I do that. Because if you have an order, you have a flow to follow, and then you remove the decisions. And we don't want to end up having decision fatigue from our routines of saying, oh, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? We want it to already be decided for us. Then just decide exactly when, where, and how you're going to do that thing. have a plan. Again, we want to remove all possible decisions from our routines. It should already be decided for you. And if you just still are like, I have no idea where to start, I am just way too overwhelmed or just way too mentally or just physically exhausted to even think about implementing a routine into my day right now, then really starting with the one-on-one guidance of a coach through this process would honestly probably be best for you. That way we can really uncover, like, what is the root cause of you feeling so overwhelmed or exhausted right now? Is there something that we can add or remove? Typically it's removing things to really fix that, and then we can start to add in the routines. But we got to just get you the help that you need now, or else you're going to stay stuck in that cycle forever, and time is going to pass and you're going to end up wishing that you had started sooner. You know, we put out these podcasts, we put out the free trainings in our Facebook groups and the free downloads and all the different free resources because we want you guys to have success on your own with the free resources. We really want you to do that. But for 99% of goal-driven people, there is a certain point in time where eventually you have to invest money in yourself if you want to level up. It's just a necessary step in ultimately reaching your goals. So start with the free stuff, then scale from there. If you're stuck, get the support you need, invest in yourself, and I promise it will give you returns in every area of your life. So that is all for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week.